A lot of us think that small talk is boring and it's a waste of our time because we have in the back of our mind, these 20 topics that we like talking about, things that we think are interesting and fascinating, and things that are gonna, deepen our conversation and deepen our connection with another person and deepen our understanding. And then we've got a bunch of other things in the back of our mind saying, these are things I don't want to talk about. I don't like TV. I don't like sports. I don't like current events. I don't like hearing about your pets. I don't like hearing about your kids. I don't like hearing about your job. All that stuff, right? We think that's all stuff we don't want to talk about. So as soon as those topics come up, we think, oh God, small talk. I don't want to talk about this. You're wasting my time. Well, the thing about that, as soon as you're labeling things, either good or bad, deep or shallow, meaningful and not meaningful, what you're really doing is you're ignoring the real value of what's right in front of you. Because there's true value in any kind of conversation that you have, not just the deep things and not just not just meaning in the deep things and no meaning in the shallow things. There's really good conversationalists, people who are good in conversation, people who are good at connecting with people, actually realize the value of small talk. They actually realize that small talk is not only something that is interesting in itself, but it's a way in which we get to know another person. It's a way in which we can find out information about another person, and we can find common ground that we can then use, that we can relate to that person and then use together in order to get somewhere else. So the small talk is a way of feeling out a situation, feeling out where a person's coming from. And from there, being able to say, okay, well, I can relate to you on this ground. And when we say, I don't want to talk about sports, you start talking about sports, that's a waste of my time. What you're actually doing in that situation is you're putting all the responsibility for the conversation, for the development of the conversation, on the other person. Because the conversation is all about sharing each other, sharing yourself with another person, and finding out about another person through what they share with you. It's not just the information. Now, if you're watching a lecture or you're in a seminar, that's a different story, because that is almost all information that's being relayed, right? Somebody's talking about something, and what you're doing is you're downloading all the information into your brain. But in a social setting, in a conversational setting, it's not all about the information. The information is actually a tool, or it's a medium in which you can get to know the other person, in which you can open up and see that if somebody's talking about his dogs, or a girl is talking about why she likes yoga or something, and you say you're not interested in yoga, or like the guy's talking about his pets, what they're actually doing is they're giving you a window into their own thinking. They're giving you a window into their own heart. They're giving you a window into their own soul, and they're showing you what their lifestyle is like. They're showing you they're not just giving you information about their dog. They're actually giving you, they're sharing their energy with you. The second somebody starts talking about sports, they say, oh, sports are boring, another dull conversation, and you're sitting here, right, thinking, oh God, this is stupid, this is dull, this is boring. What you're doing is you're thinking about the information that's coming at you. You're not thinking about who the person is behind it. So, in any of these small talk moments, always remember that the real purpose of the conversation that you're having is to engage with the other person, not to engage with the information that's being conveyed. Now that's one function of a conversation, but much more importantly, above all the information, the words are kind of like this, right, between you and me, but above the words there's a whole nother level of communication going on, and that's a level of communication that's beyond words, that's beyond thought, and that's where two human beings really relate. That's where, if you're talking to somebody of the opposite sex, that's where real chemistry happens. Chemistry doesn't necessarily happen in your personal interests and your personal activities. That's part of it. But much more importantly, it's something that's above that. It's how you express yourself. It's how you relate to the world. It's your kind of like your emotional connection to your own life and your own. It's your own understanding of your own natural expression, right? And that's where you find the common ground.
So now that I realize the value of small talk and I decide to be more engaged with every person I'm talking to, once I kind of find myself in a situation where we're talking about something boring, what's the best way to transition into something either more deep or into a conversation that's more fun?
Yeah. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're saying, okay, I understand the value of small talk now. I get the value of it. Now I found myself again in a situation where I don't want to talk about this stuff. How do I transition into something deeper? The first thing, before you transition into something deeper, because that's again thinking about the substance, thinking about how can I talk about something that's going to be interesting to me, that's going to be stimulating to me, that's not going to be wasting my time. What's really important is the person who you're talking to. So if you think that the person who you're talking to is a waste of your time, then stop talking to them. If you do want to get to know this person, and you don't want to talk about sports, and you don't want to talk about coffee because you don't like coffee, and what you really want to talk about is something that you enjoy, well, then all you have to do is be curious about what they're all about. There's no problem in changing the conversation at hand. A lot of times when we're in a conversation, we're changing the topic of conversation at hand. A lot of times when we're in a conversation, we don't want to offend the other person, so we sit there and we go along with, the latest LA Lakers game, or how you went for a hike last Saturday, and aren't the mountains beautiful, and you took pictures, and you want to see the pictures on my iPhone. The reason we keep going with that conversation, going, oh, that's interesting, okay, that's interesting, okay, that's interesting, is because we don't care. Not only do we not care about what they're saying, we actually don't care about the person. When you shift your focus to the person instead of what they're telling you, then you're bringing your own responsibility back into the conversation. You're bringing your own power back into the conversation. If you like talking about the origin of the universe and metaphysics and all that stuff, and they're talking about hiking, tell them about what your thoughts are when you're out in the forest and you look up into the sky at night and think about what your place is in the universe or whatever. You say, I remember I was hiking a few weeks ago, or I was outside a few weeks ago, and I looked up into the sky and I was like, oh my God, the universe is such a ridiculous place. When you think about our place in it and where we came from and where we're going. In a small talk situation, if we feel trapped in small talk, a lot of times we'll put ourselves into the frame of mind of saying, I have to be polite, so if you're talking about dogs, then I have to talk about your love of dogs, or the kind of dog that you have, or what's your dog's name? How old is your dog? If you don't want to talk about that, you don't have to talk about that. You're just kind of going along trying to be polite, trying to satisfy the other person. You don't want to care about what their dog's name is. Talk about what your favorite dog is. Talk about your scariest dog story. Talk about why you don't like dogs. Talk about what your favorite animal is, right? Or ask them, if you don't like dogs, ask them why they're interested in dogs. What other animals do they like? So you shift your attention away from what they're telling you and shift it into what you're interested in about them and interested in the situation at hand and what you can relate about your own life to them. And when you do that, your conversations naturally start shifting to things that you care about. You'll find mutual ground to connect with the person that you're talking to. And if you don't, you don't. Sometimes you just don't vibe with people, and that's perfectly fine. So listen to the words that she's saying. Listen to every word that she says. But also look at what's right in front of you. Look at the person who's saying it. Look at why she's saying it. Feel it out. Feel it right here. Feel it in your mind, feel it in your heart.